morning. Today we're going to be the book of Isaiah. If you want to find Isaiah chapter 40, verse 41, I believe it is here, but somewhere around there. I just wanted to say what a great Easter morning we had and Easter night. And it's not the same for me preaching to windshields, and it's certainly not the same for me doing things online. But for the moment, we can trust that God knows what's going on. And I do hope you'll keep in touch as much as you can with our morning moments, our evening posts. The midday thing with the kids is just for fun, but morning and evening, I'm addressing issues as well as sometimes just Bible. But there's last night, if you didn't see it, my son and I addressed this matter of what we might call civil disobedience, Monday and Tuesday nights in the evening post. And just some thoughts about how do we line up in a society when leaders are getting off, and how do we handle those kind of things. So anyway, it's worth keeping up. We don't know what's going on from day to day. I used to have staff meetings at the beginning of the week, but since we don't know what's going on at the end of the week, I kind of wait till the end of the week, and then we meet online or whatever we can do to figure out a way to run into each other and keep up with the needs of the church. But thank you for your faithfulness. Thank you for just being there. Great crowd Sunday morning, and then Sunday night we had a good crowd as well. And we don't know where we'll be this Sunday morning, but I trust you'll be there. And I hope you'll be faithful to be a part of our giving tonight. And again, just prefacing some things. Tonight's Wednesday Bible study is on faith, and I'll mention that again later. But our others offering, Wednesday others offerings are very important. They've been a part, our Wednesday offerings are significant in the lives of people around the world. We had a Wednesday others offering for some widows recently, and one of the widows, a preacher's wife, and he's been gone for some years now, and a check got to her. She sent me a note. She said, "Who would have guessed, Brother Goddard? I had some unusual medical tests and needed some money for whatever it was, medicine or whatever." She didn't say. And she said, "That day, your check came in the mail. Isn't God good?" And we have no idea who we're influencing. Now, last week we had an offering, on Wednesday we had an offering for Christian Law Association. They have helped so many people around the country. They're legal missionaries. Never send a bill, just try to be a help to churches. They're wonderful people. And this Wednesday tonight, our others offering is for Eddie Gallion. He's a very, very, just a wonderful missionary, just a very great man. He and his wife, and they are in the Philippines, up in the mountains outside of Manila. And he sent a letter a while back that they're trying to raise money for staff housing. And so we're going to send a check just to try and help out with his staff. Growing church. He's been there some years now, and a great church. And so we want to be a help to them. But I know when we're not here, it's awkward. So put that with your online giving. You can come by the church at any time and slip something under the door between 2 and 3 each day. We have one of our staff men will be in the lobby of the church or out front, just hanging out. And between 2 and 3, if you want to know for sure, you find a human being. Unless something comes up, but that's the rule. Right now our whole world's a little unstable. But between 2 and 3, a staff member will be here, or call me. And please, you're not a bother. I have a cell phone. Most of you have that number. If you don't, call the office. They'll get it to you. All of our church members are welcome to call me, and we're friends. We're family, and I love you, and I'm just honored to have a church family like you. I've often thought if we could pack up our church and just get in our cars and drive out of liberal California and go somewhere, it'd be great, but then everybody be out of work. And but if I had you as a group of people, I don't care where I am, and we spent 9.5 years in a tent. We could go out somewhere in not in Arizona and put up a tent. We would die. But God knows where we are, what's going on. So let's be faithful to our giving, please. And again, we're at our budget again, and just God's good. He's merciful, and you are kind and generous. And let's be good to one another. Think about our senior citizens. If God puts somebody in your heart, there's a reason. send a text, make a phone call, or send a note in the mail. And some of you don't know they make stamps and envelopes, and you can actually use handwriting and pens and pencils and write notes to people. But be good to people. Well, they just I was going to tell you some neat thing, but there's too many. We got to get to the Bible. But our people are the best. I just love our church. I love the spirit of our church. We've got people 70, 80, 90 years old. They love our church. This is home, and they've got such a great, encouraging spirit. And then we got young people, of course. Our church has always had an unusually blessed ministry to children and teens and young adults and college age. And I'm so thankful for them. And great place and great people. Thank you for being so good. Let's look at our Bible. The Bible says in Isaiah, I've got 41. We're going to get to 41. We're going to start in Isaiah 55. And just a quick word this morning. I hear from people, this is, we get up in the morning, get breakfast, and listen to your morning moments. And at different times people do it. But I hope that they're an encouragement and a help. This is familiar to many of you. But when I pray, Isaiah 55, we're going to get back over to 41. But when I pray, I try to pray with the long term in mind. A young couple may not need the money to buy a house. It may not be best for them. It may be they need to strive and struggle and achieve a dozen smaller goals before they get the big goal of a house. I have no idea. You know what I'm talking about. In business, it's sometimes the journey is more of a blessing than the destination. And so, and in so many areas of life, it's that way. So God works these things out. With children, it's that way. Raising children, it's the day in, day out, sometimes wearing you out. But when I pray, I think about, I try to think about the big picture, but to be honest, my big picture thinking is still very limited. And it's only within the day, the month, the year, maybe the decade at the most, or perhaps I'm thinking about the whole life of a person. Here's a young person, where will they be at 30, 40, 50 or whatever? But most of us, when we pray, the scope of our prayers is rarely global and rarely eternal, except about souls being saved. And of course, we want to have people get saved. But like when I pray, I'm bothered about our rest homes. I'm bothered about the people dying without Christ in rest homes that we're not getting, and not just us, but churches around America are not getting there. Take a moment to pray, and I pray that God would keep people alive and until we can get back to those rest homes and to get them the gospel. And I pray, and I think about young people out of Sunday school, and I think about our bus riders out of Sunday school. I think of the children who are not riding a bus, who would have ridden a bus and would have gotten saved. And I pray, and I hope you'll pray, because we want them, their eternal life taken care of, but we also want their spiritual life today to make a difference. And I don't understand why we are where we are. Let's understand the overruling hand of God is here, and the world is not coming to an end. We may need to fuss at some people along the way. It's a shame we had to fuss and fuss and fuss and have a bunch of attorneys fussing and fussing and fussing. Not just our church, but we did. But it's not just our church, but other churches I know. And in other parts of our area, and then in other parts of our country, people are fussing about this thing of going to church. And the Attorney General, if you didn't read it recently, he said, I understand the need for health and safety, but we want an even-handed approach. And he was very specific. He said, I do not want us making these decisions about what can and can't be done, and in prejudice, and that's my word, I can't remember the word he used, of religious organizations. And we've been saying that, right, for several weeks now. If you can go to Stater Brothers, or you can go to the grocery store, the hardware store, you can go to the drive-in hamburger joint, if you can go to the liquor store, you certainly should be able to drive into a parking lot, stay in your car, and hear preaching. And that's just, that's logical, it's honest, it's decent, and everybody with an honest appraisal of things knows it's that way. Now, there's a lot of people who have the facts wrong. There's a lot of people who don't think right. And of course, there's a devil who'd rather people be at the liquor store than in church. But we'll talk about that another time. Last night, if you heard, we talked a little bit about it. But the fact is, God does know what's going on. And he's in charge, and don't panic. Don't panic. And sometimes you may panic like you're on a roller coaster. You know you're going to be okay, but you still scream. And that's life. That's the spirit and the flesh. And my spirit says God's in charge. My flesh says, but I'm still going to scream. But here in Isaiah 55, he says, for my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are my ways your ways, saith the Lord. For as the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts. And so he assures us he doesn't think like we think. And God thinks higher. God thinks eternal. God thinks of nations being developed. Here he calls Abraham. And what's on God's mind? Well, God's mind is creating a nation. God's mind is calling out a chosen nation. But there's Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Joseph in bondage in Egypt. Then Israel goes down there 400 years. Hey, God's got the big picture in mind. And when burdens happen, understand, I just don't want my backache. I don't want my child being treated, bullied or whatever. And our scope is so small, and God's scope is so large. And so understand Revelation chapter 1. Stay there in Isaiah. We're going to be right to Isaiah 41 in a minute. But in Revelation chapter 1, very familiar passage as well. But God is speaking. Jesus shows up speaking to John, and he says, I am Alpha and Omega, the beginning and the ending, saith the Lord, which is and which was and is to come, the Almighty. Jesus is eternal. He knows the beginning, he knows the end, he knows everything in between. And nobody's catching Jesus off guard. And he knows what's going on. And even the evil men, as evil as Pharaoh was, God says, I raised you up for my glory. And you wait and see. There's some evil people that will end up being bringing glory to God. And of course, when the evil and the wicked bow before Jesus and call him Lord, that day is going to come. Every mocker of the Bible and every mocker of Christianity and the church and the work of God, and every knee will bow. Philippians 2 says, and every tongue will confess that Jesus Christ is Lord to the glory of God the Father. And they may mock now, but they're not going to mock later. But God has a plan. Look at Isaiah 41 and down at verse 4. Who hath wrought and done it, calling the generations from the beginning? I, the Lord, the first. And here he changes it from where we see in Revelation 1, I the first and with the last. God is with the last times. God is the first and God is with the last. He knows these things. He's got these things sorted out. And we can trust him. And again, this morning I was praying for one of our men's brother-in-law who's got cancer, and he's not expected to live long. And I'm thinking it's bad enough to be facing all that, but because of our current situation, visiting is very difficult, and getting the contact that he might have had, the comfort and the love of family and friends is difficult. Traveling is difficult. One of our dear missionaries down in New Guinea had to, at the last minute, leave the country, and the embassy or whoever it was involved with them said, if you plan on getting out of the country, you better go right now, immediately. And they go to the airport, they bought plane tickets, and they went at the airport, they go to fly out, and the flight's canceled, and the tickets were gone, lost. They go buy another set of tickets on another airline, and it's a long story. They had to buy 2 or 3 sets of tickets and all that money, and then they come and land in they said when they landed in San Francisco, they were so happy to be in America. Now, if they're so happy to be in America, why don't we just say, thank God I'm in America, with whatever difficulties we've got. But why? I don't know why did they have to spend all that money? We're going to send them some money, but why did they have to spend that? And why the anxiousness? And why the concern? And I don't know why God has those things, but I know him. I know he's good, and I know he's faithful, and I know he's true. And the battles that we face, those battles are to strengthen us and to encourage us. And those battles, when we go through those battles, trusting in him, I just think God's looking at the devil saying, you old deceiver, my people still love me even when it's hard. Just like he did with Job. After the Lord, Satan challenged Job's integrity, and God let the devil take his wealth and all. And God said to the devil, see, you moved me against him, and still he doth retain his integrity. He still loves me, still honors and respects me. That's the kind of Christians we ought to want to be. See, In Daniel, there's a verse here. If you can find Daniel, I'll read it. Of course, Daniel is a prisoner. He's over modern day on the other side of Saudi Arabia, Iraq, Iran area. He's from Israel. Nations destroyed, homes destroyed. He's been carried, family's gone. He's carried away. The king said, "I want the most choice young men that are smart and sharp, and good looking." He wanted the best of the Jewish young men, and he wanted to train them up to be advisors for him. And he'd conquer a country, and because he wanted to rule the world. Nebuchadnezzar did, and but he can't rule the world when you don't know what's going on. And so he thought, I'll get the best of Jewish young men. I'll get the best of German and and it wasn't no Germany then, but the best people from China and Russia and Ecuador, wherever. And I know they weren't in Ecuador, but you know what I'm talking about. He got the best, sharpest young men, and they were his princes that helped him rule. They were his cabinet that helped him know what's going on. That's why we ought to pray for our president. Who is it giving our president advice? He can't know everything. Pray. I pray for the president, his wife. Pray for their little boy. I pray for their adult children. And then I pray God give him good advisors and silence the critics and the false advisors. But here Daniel is carried far away. And you look at the text here in Daniel chapter 2 and verse 21, and Daniel is talking about God's greatness and God's willingness to answer prayer and let him interpret dreams and all. And he says in verse 21 of Daniel 2, "And he changeth the times and the seasons. He removeth kings. He setteth up kings. He giveth wisdom to the wise and knowledge to them that know understanding. He revealeth the deep and secret things. He knoweth what is in the darkness, and the light dwelleth with him." God is in control, and God sets up kings. God takes down kings. God moves princes into position. Don't you think it was a shock to the world when President Trump got elected? And aren't we glad now that it was him? And many of us, I don't know, most of us, who knows, when he started out, he wasn't our first pick, but he's sure my first pick today. And looking back, I think, wow, that was God that gave us a man who could handle these things. And so God's in charge. And Acts chapter 1 verse 7 says he knows the times and the seasons. He knows what's going on, and he's faithful. Now, God looks at things in the prospect of the whole world. You know, my little baby boy, my fourth child, Josiah, somebody said, "Pastor, we're watching, we hear this noise." And the husband said to his wife, "That's his chair. That's my chair. I have a noisy chair." But it's not supposed to sound pretty. It's supposed to be comfortable, and it is. But my little boy, Josiah, when he was born, here he is, that little kid. And he was odd, and he was very, who knows, just every little kid's got their different idiosyncrasies. And but you know what? God was shaping a young man, and right now he's planning on going to Trinidad as a missionary. I don't know what will happen. I don't know what the future holds, but God does. And God knows what kind of a life Josiah needed in order to be what God wanted him to be down the road. And I don't know. As a parent, I want to get him to know God. I want to try and educate him a little bit. I want to teach him character, honesty, integrity, hard work, get him some kind of an education, teach him to work with his hands, teach him to think. But after that, I don't know. But isn't it good, you parents, isn't it good to know that God knows what our children need? And sometimes it's hardship, and sometimes it's injustice, and sometimes it's difficulty. And in my case, my dad left when I was maybe fourth grade or so, fifth grade, and then I had the single mom for some years, and then I had a stepdad, and of course just loved and adored my stepdad, and still miss him. And but you know, God knows what we need, and God isn't up in heaven pacing back and forth trying to figure out what to do next. And he knows where you are this morning, and he knows what's going on. Now, it's our job to be faithful. It's our job to work hard. But think about Moses. I was reading just this morning. Moses comes, he's out minding his own business, watching the sheep. Exodus chapter 1 and 2. Exodus actually 2, 3, 4. And a bush is on fire. He goes to the bush, and God speaks to him, says, "Go tell Pharaoh, set my people free." And you know the story. Moses and Aaron. Aaron meets him. Moses and Aaron go down there, say to Moses, "Set my people go. Let my people go. Set my people free to worship." He did just what he was told. And what happens? Pharaoh sends word to the taskmasters to whip and beat the Jewish people because they're idle. They're thinking, they're vainly thinking about worship when they should be working. And by the way, the world doesn't understand us and our worship and our love for God. But here Moses meets these people and they're mad at him. Since you've come, things have gotten harder. And I can imagine with Moses, I didn't want to be here, Moses can say. I wanted to be up in the hills with my sheep and with my wife and my boys. I didn't ask to be here. And people are mad at him and yelling at him. And it wasn't his fault. He was exactly where God wanted, doing exactly what God told him to do. And this big old mess, and the people he's supposed to deliver are mad at him. And isn't it the same way with Jeremiah? God called Jeremiah chapter 1, from the womb he was ordained a prophet to the nations. And here Jeremiah is, and he didn't want to be a preacher. He said, I'm just a child. I don't have any business doing this. And God says, no, I've ordained you. Don't be afraid of their faces. And Jeremiah spent his whole ministry being hated, being cursed at, being beaten, being jailed. And he was abused in every way imaginable, and people threatened to kill him. And he lived in hiding, and all his whole, and everything he said came to pass. Everything, he was right, but how empty and how hurtful was his ministry. But you know what? God didn't call us to make us comfortable. He called us to make him happy. God didn't call Moses so Moses could have this nice little happy life. God called Moses to do the will of God, to lead a nation out of captivity into the promised land. And God knows what's going on. And look, we've got to understand there's a war going on. The devil's out there fighting and attacking, and he's after us. And you see, that's why we live by faith. Hebrews 11:6, without faith, it's impossible to please God. Tonight, Wednesday night, our Wednesday nights, we just started last Wednesday on faith, and we're going to be talking about it tonight. This thing of faith. Why do we keep going when things go wrong? Because he knows. He knows. God knows what's going on. God knows what he needs, and God knows he needs a tough guy to handle all the criticism and all the slander and the constant attack of the media and everybody in Washington, D.C. So what's he do? He puts a guy in construction and in real estate in one of the toughest, most backstabbing, difficult worlds that you could be in, and he raises up President Trump. And who knows how many mean things were said to him and how many slanderous things, how many lies were told about him. I could not take all that he's taking. But I've not been brought up like him. But God raised up this man. And back then he might have said, why are people so deceitful or whatever? I don't know about his young life, but I know business in New York could not have been easy. Success is never easy. But here he is in the White House. I'm sure glad he's tough. I'm sure glad he faced these things. And maybe your child is facing some difficult times and you're thinking, God, I'd sure like to help my child. And maybe God doesn't want you to help your child. I don't know. Maybe your child just needs to be tough and needs to hang in there and get through these things. All I know is his ways are higher than our ways. Isaiah 55:17, and we can trust him. We can lean on him. And today, let's trust him today. Let's go on into our life and look forward to being together this evening for our evening Bible study on faith.